This section is on percent and percent of change. Okay, so something like, you know, you go to a store and something's this much percent off, or something is increased by this much percent. How do you find that percent number? Okay, so some common examples of percent of increase and percent of decrease here. Things like sales tax, right? You buy something that's $19.95, and you go up to the counter and you have to pay $21 and some change, right? These are percents of increase. Also, finding a tip. Okay, you go to a dinner, you need to leave, let's say, 15% tip. What's 15% of that number, right? And then you have percent of decrease, things that are decreased by a percent. Okay, so things that are on sale, right? You go, something's 30% off. How do you find that 30%? Also, population decreases. You know, some town decreases, its population goes down 20%. What is that number? Okay, so those are things we use these for. So what percent of change is? It's the amount as a percent that a number increases or that a number decreases. Okay, how much it changed. And we have two types of percent of change. We have an increase, where the number goes up, and a decrease where the number goes down. Okay, percent of increase, the number is increased by a percent. Percent of decrease, it's decreased by a percent. Makes sense, right? How we find that, how we find the percent of change, okay, is the percent of change is equal to that amount of change, the amount the number changed, divided by the original amount. The amount of change divided by the original amount. Okay. So it changed. So finding a percent of change. For example, let's say something was originally $27, okay, and the new item is $20. First of all, is that going to be a percent of increase or decrease? Decrease, right? The new thing is less than the original amount. Okay, it's a percent of decrease. So I know it's a percent of decrease. How much did it decrease? By how much? 7, right? It just decreased by, let's say it's $7. And to find that percent, we take the amount it changed and divide it by the original amount. So you take 7 divided by 27. Okay. Point which 5? Oh, that's 20. That's what you got something different. Point 2 what? 259, and it continues, right? So remember, this is a decimal. Okay. How do you change the decimal to a percentage? Anybody remember how to do that? Yeah, Jay. Exactly. You move the decimal place 2 units to the right. The reason is a percentage is out of 100, right? So we need to multiply this by 100, which is the same thing as moving the decimal 2 to the right. So it is a percent of decreased by 25.9%. Okay. In the book, when you guys do these problems, it says round to the nearest whole percent. So what would be your answer rounding to the nearest whole percent? 26%, right? It decreased by 26%. So I know there's problems on the test like this, and in the homework it says something like this. It says first, is it a percent of increase or decrease? You would say it decreased because the new number is less than the original. And then what percentage is that? You take the amount it changed and divide it by the original. Okay. Another way you can look at it is you can, if you write the verbal equation, right? If I say the change is what percent of the original? That's what I'm trying to find here, right? The change is what percent of the original? Well, that's it in words. The change, okay, was 7. The word is equals what percent, that's the variable as a percent, of means multiplication, the original is 27. And right, to solve for this, I would then divide both sides by 27, which that's what you did in the first place. You took 7 divided by 27, and you got 25.9%. Okay? So if you ever forget that, just write the verbal equation. I know the change is what percent of the original, and then solve this equation. But if you just remember to take the change divided by the original, that helps you find that percent. Okay. All right, another one here. The original is 32. The new is 67. Percent of increase or percent of decrease? Increase, right? It got a lot bigger. Okay. So it's a percent of increase. Now let's just take an estimate here first. I know that the new number more than doubled the original number, right? Because double the original number is 64. So I know the new number, is it going to be greater than 100% or less than 100% of the new number? It's going to be greater than, because 100% of the original number is 32, right? And I went up, it looks like, by 35, right? So remember, you take the change and you divide it by the original amount, okay? Can somebody do that for me on their calculator? 35 divided by 32? Awesome. 1.09, okay? Remember, that's the decimal. To make the percentage, you have to multiply by 100, which also means you move the decimal 2 places to the right. So that means the percent of change is 109%. Okay? That's it, right? And that makes sense, right? Because 100% would have been 64, because that would have been doubling this. So it's a little bit over 100% because I went to 67. I always take the change in these two numbers divided by the original amount. Any questions with that? Wow, let's try 1 or 2 more of these here. The original amount is 20. The new is 11. I want you to try this yourself. First of all, we know it's a percent of decrease, right? It went down. Percent of decrease. What percent did it decrease? I want you to find that right now. The change, which was 9, it decreased by 9. Divide that by the original amount, and you get something like 0.45 something, right? And it keeps going. Okay? So then you have to multiply that by 100, which means move the decimal 2 to the left. So you get the increase is 45%. Okay? Which makes sense because this was almost 50% of the new number, right? 50% of the new number would have been 10. Okay? So a little bit more than that means my percent of decrease is a little bit less than 50%, which is 45. Okay. Original is 42, new is 72. It's a percent of increase. And to find that percent, I take how much I increased divided by the original amount. 0.714, right? And so on. Again, multiply this to make it a percent by 100. The percent of increase is 71.4%. Okay, we see how that works? I can tell you right now, I think there's either 4 or 6 questions on the test just like this. Yes, question. Good? Okay. Right, the test on the homework, and I think on the test too, it says round to the nearest whole percent. So the nearest whole percent here would be 71, right? Remember, if it's 5 or up, you round up. If it's 4 or less, you round down. If it doesn't say, you can round to whatever you want. But most of the time, it should say. These problems don't say, so I've just been taking it to 1 decimal. Okay. So we've got the hang of those. Now, with word problems, it's the exact same thing. So you shot an 86 on the golf course on Monday, then you shot a 95. What's the percent of change? Well, first of all, is it a percent increase or decrease? Increase, I got worse, right? In golf terms, I got worse. Okay. So I want to find out how much did I increase. I take the amount that it changed. So how many more strokes did I shoot on Friday than Monday? 9, right? And I divide that by the original amount because I want to see what percent of the original amount did I increase. I punch that in my calculator, 9 divided by 86. 0.104 and so on. Then remember, you move the decimal 2 to the right, which means it's a percent of increase of 10.4%. Okay. You become an architect, you made $90,000 in 2014, you made $120,000 in 2015. What's the percent of increase? Well, it's a percent of increase. I increased, I got a $30,000 raise. I divide that by the original amount. Now I could actually just simplify this fraction, right? Because I can cancel the zeros. I get 3 over 9, which is 1/3. And 1/3 as a decimal, you should get like 0.333, so on. Right. So the increase, I got a 33.3% raise, right? Okay. I made $30,000 more, I got a 33.3% raise. Okay. When you know the percent of change, you can use an equation or a proportion to find the actual amount. So for example, okay, you go to the store and a pair of sandals is $31.99. It's on sale for 25% off. Find the amount of the discount. Okay. So there's a couple different ways we can do this. One, if we say, okay, the sandals are $31.99. Okay, I usually buy, the $4 Old Navy sandals, but if you buy $31.99 sandals, that's fine. Okay. So $31.99. I want 25% of that. What's the word of mean? Multiplication. And 25%. Remember, that's like 25 out of 100, which means where do I need to put the decimal when I use it in my calculator? I have to go 2 to the left to make it a decimal, right? To go from a decimal percent, you go 2 to the right. To go from a percent to a decimal, you go the other way. So when I do that, $31.99 times 0.25, that's how much percent off it is. That's how many dollars off it is. What do we get when we do that? $7.99. Great. So these pair of sandals are $7.99 off. That's not how much I'm paying for them. That's how much I'm saving. So to find the actual amount of the discount, or that's the amount of the discount. That's all this problem asks. Okay? If you wanted to find how much you paid, you would just take that and subtract it from this, right? What's another way, doing in one step, you could find out how much you were going to pay? Let's say you just want to find out how much you were going to pay. We're going to erase that. If the sandals are $31.99, what percent are you paying for them? If they're 25% off, how much percent are you paying? You're paying 75%, right? If they're 25% off. So if you take that times 7.75, that's how much you're going to be paying for them, right? You're not paying 100% of the cost. You're paying 75% of the cost. Okay? So you punch $31.99 times 0.75 in your calculator. Right? Okay. You're paying about $23.99 for that pair of sandals. Okay. So that's another way. You could have just subtracted that $7.99. And again, I rounded, so they're not going to be exact. Okay. So that's how we find that. Let's look at one or two more of those. Okay. Pair of shoes is a 98% increase from its wholesale price. Okay. So these pair of shoes just skyrocketed. The wholesale is 98. Everybody wants them, so they 98% increase. The wholesale price is $12.50. Where you can buy shoes for $12.50, I don't really know. If you got fat feet like me, you can't anywhere. Right? Okay. What's the retail price? So I need to do 98% increase of this. So I'm going to know what is 98% of multiplication. So 0.98, 98% of $12.50. So that's how much increased in price these shoes went up. So to find the retail price, because remember the retail price is 98% increased of this, I would take $12.50 plus $12.25. So the total price would be $24.75. Yeah. So I had a 98% increase of $12.50. Remember, just sound it out in your head if you get stuck. Of means multiplication. Okay. Then you can find it from there. Questions there?
You could have multiplied by 1.98.
Multiply by 1.98? Yes. Why?
Because it gives you the exact answer.
Because it gives you the exact answer. Instead of, yes, you can do that way also. Right. If we find the percent here and then add that, you can do it that way too. Good. Okay. Regular price of a sweater is $42.99. It's 20% off. Find the amount. Okay. I want you to do that real quick by yourself, and this is the last one we're going to do. So let's see if we tried it different ways. Yeah, Parker, what did you do to find the answer?
I multiplied it by 0.8.
Good. So we took $42.99 and multiplied by 0.8 or 0.80. That's one way to do it. Why did he do it this way? Somebody else besides Parker. Why did he do it this way? Why does that give me the right answer? Yeah.
Because it finds the best sale price.
Yeah, right. If it's 20% off, that means I'm paying 80%. So I want to find 80% of $42.99. I punched that, and what'd you get?
$34.39.
$34.39. So that's the sale price. So if I wanted to find the amount of discount, I just subtract those numbers and I can find the discount. The other way you could have found it, there's a couple different ways. The other way you could have found it is if you took $42.99 times 0.20, that gives you, okay, the amount that it's discounted. Okay, and I think that's something like 8.7. 8.5 something?
9.
8.59?
Yeah.
Right? So that's its discounted $8.59. If I just subtract that from $42.99, I get something around $34.99. Again, not exactly because I did some rounding, but within a couple cents.
It's better to do the out of 100.
This way, it's a little
Yeah.
quicker. Yeah. Okay. But if it also asks for the discount, you might need to subtract that at the end, right? Okay. What about this? Who can tell me if I said, okay, forget all this, it's 10% off. Without using your calculator, how can you calculate 10% off? Yeah, Thomas?
You take 42.89 times 0.9.
That's true, but without using your calculator, how could you do that? What do you do with the decimal? Anybody remember that? Yeah, Chase?
You move it one space to the left.
Yeah, you move it one space to the left whenever you do 10%. So that means 10% of that is 4.299. So that means 20% would be double this, right? It would be 4.299 plus 4.299. I'd add those together. 30% would be that 3 times itself, right? So personally, that's what I do in a store. If something's 30% off, I figure out, okay, what's 10%? All right, 10% might be $5. Well, then if I multiply that by 3 to get 30%, okay, then it would be $15, 30% off, right? So finding 10% is really easy. You just move the decimal 1 to the left. Yeah, which is the same thing as multiplying by 0.1. All right. So now we're going to do this iPad activity.